Hey everyone, and welcome to the Hormone Genius podcast. Teresa and I are doing something a little different today. We have two guests with us today, and we will be talking all about this new movement called Holistic Feminism. It's going to be kind of like the View style type of interview, which is what I'm excited about. A conversation about holistic feminism, what this means, and you'll learn more here in a minute. But who joins me is Sarah Capriva. She's the executive director of Guiding Star Cedar Valley, leading efforts to further establish the organizational mission to empower women, embrace children, and enrich families through their unique healthcare model in the Cedar Falls Waterloo community. Sarah is a dear friend, and she's such a wonderful leader and a great holistic feminist. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then Leah Jacobson is with us here as well, who actually started this movement and is the CEO and founder of the Guiding Star Project. She's also a mother to 7 children and is an international board certified lactation consultant. So we'll get a little bit more into who they are, what they do. But again, we're just excited for our listeners to walk away knowing a little bit more about what it means to be a holistic feminist. And we hope that it'll just be a very empowering episode. So, Teresa, are you ready to get started with these beautiful ladies?
Yeah, totally ready. And I'm just thankful because I don't know if I've ever really thought about this term. And it's something I think I've known I've done for years, holistic feminism work in a sense. But I'm just thankful for Leah writing this book, Holistic Feminism, and really making me stop and think about it. Not only that, I just gave a talk for the first time, and I used this in my talk and asked a group of men and women, what do you think holistic feminism means? And I had them take a piece of paper and write it down, because I think we need to all kind of ponder what in our hearts, what does this thing, this feminism word, that may have negative history to it, or holistic, what does that mean to us? And frankly, I was like blown away by the first thing that I read that this young man wrote. And I can't do it justice, so I'm not going to. But afterwards, I just said to him, drop the mic. Like he put it into words perfectly. And he was sitting right next to his engaged beloved, and it was just beautiful to hear those words of a man being able to really put that into definition. So I'm hoping this conversation, we can really go deep into what that means to us, and to open that up for people.
Amen. So how about we start, Leah and Sarah. Again, the reason we have both of these ladies in with us is because of this movement of holistic feminism. And so Leah is the founder of this mission and this movement. And then Sarah is directing a center that is a worldview distribution center. That will make more sense a little later on. But Leah, how would you describe holistic feminism? Because I am sure that word feminism is very triggering to people because of this misunderstanding sense of it. So how about you tell us a little bit about what you mean by that?
Yeah, I think both words actually are triggering.
Holistic and feminism.
Well, and it's important to note that whole in holistic is really, it's different. It's not the Eastern sort of medicine of holistic. It's whole with a W, which really connotates wholeness, that you are, you have your integrity, that you have not been dissected and broken up into smaller pieces, that you are one whole mind, body, spirit, human person. So that word is really important, holistic. And then as it applies to feminism, it really just is directing that word whole at women. And what does it look like to be a woman who is, not altered, suppressed, dissected in our culture? What does it mean to be whole in your identity? What does it mean to live a life full of purpose and happiness and meaning? And in order to do that, we have to be whole as women. So it's looking at the women's movement, it's looking at feminism and saying, in what ways have you taken parts of our identity as women? Have you taken parts of the pieces of our whole and removed them from the necessary equation of knowing ourselves and finding purpose and meaning in this world? And I think that the women's movement over the last 100 years in particular really missed the mark on what it means to be a woman and what the most important parts about being a woman are, specifically our bodies. It really made our bodies kind of an optional part of womanhood, which is not the case. You know, if you are whole and in your being, your body really matters.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Totally. Sarah, how would you say, thank you for explaining that, Leah, and we'll dig into that even more. And again, I hope by the end of this episode, our listeners will have a sense of like the history in a sense of feminism and what it really means to be a holistic feminist. But Sarah, from your perspective, just growing up, how would you see, what came to mind when you thought about feminism and even further yet, women's healthcare? And what have you come to know about the truth of what it really can be?
Yeah, thank you, Jamie. First of all, I've just, ever since I, came into this particular world of holistic feminism, it's like I've finally figured out who I was, and I finally felt seen in my womanhood, my motherhood, and the authentic parts of who I am. And that wasn't always the case. I feel like, looking back on my story, and not to, diminish anything about the women that came before me and the women who raised me, loved me, my, aunts, mother, grandmothers, etc. They're wonderful women, but they are, they're part of or product of this generation that really embraced the idea that, contraception and taking away pieces of our fertility was the answer to women's freedom and women's rights. And how that ultimately affected me, growing up, I always kind of struggle with body image issues, weight, etc. But as a high schooler, found out that I had cysts on my ovaries, had some terrible cycles, very painful, etc. And the first thing that they went to was, oh, we'll just stick you on a birth control pill and that'll fix everything. And, obviously there were some levels of that helped, or at least in my mind, took away some of the symptoms of what I was feeling. But it opened up these doors of other issues for me, depression, anxiety, my body image issues worsened with the weight gain. I started dealing with some eating disorders, and it really did change how I looked at my body. I looked at my relationships, my interactions with boys at the time. I mean, it really gave me a different perspective on what I was able to do now with my body, and maybe put me in this place that I wasn't really ready for. I thought I was, because all of a sudden I had this magical thing called a birth control pill. But it started to chip away at my identity. It chipped away at who I was as a person, and left some of that dignity on the table, and really affected how I went through my teenage years and my early 20s, until I discovered the Creighton model and learning about my cycle and understanding more about why my body was doing these crazy things in regards to my cycle. And it completely changed me to understand the body in that way. And I think it finally let me see my own heart in what that was. It was, when Leah talks about this holistic idea of what it means to be a woman, I was so disconnected from my body, from the effects of being on the pill for 10 years and the relationships I had entered into, and the, eating disorder side of things. I mean, I was a mess. And being able to connect with my body, it completely changed my story. It completely changed my heart. It helped me understand so much more about who I was meant to be. And ultimately, it saved my life. It created something so powerful in me to finally be a whole person and seen as a whole person. So much.
That your story, of course, is similar to hundreds and thousands of women out there. This idea that, at one point in your life, you don't know what you don't know. You're, dealing now with problems. You're given an answer. And again, it doesn't mean the answer didn't help. It didn't mean the answer didn't give you some relief. It just means that at some point when you did find out this idea of who you were and how your body worked, it stopped or fully integrated you into identity you didn't know was there, into a wholeness that you didn't know you had because the information had never been given to you. And so, I mean, Leah, in coming to, I mean, obviously you've been working in this area for a long time. So this book is a culmination of years of, kind of understanding the movement, but just understanding in your heart what women deserve. So really, at what point did you know you really wanted to write this book and really give women this perspective of what has happened in the last 100 years?
Yeah, I think for me, it was my work in the lactation world, actually, that really clinched the thesis that was forming in my brain over all these years, having worked with young women in campus ministry, having, my own children, being in mothering circle groups, just talking with women a lot. I was getting more and more uncomfortable with just women's general perception and view towards themselves and their bodies and what it means to live a happy life. But as I did my master's work in women's health and wellness and lactation consulting, it really clicked when I started working in a WIC office and talking with women. And that was my first, real volunteer kind of experience working in lactation and really sitting with women in that super vulnerable time that's postpartum. And the comments about women, even that were expecting, that hadn't even delivered yet, they had an expectation of failure. They just didn't think their body worked. And there was no reason for them to expect for this to fail, except they would tell me things like, well, my body, I mean, I've always just had a weird body. I mean, I don't even have regular cycles. Like I'm probably gonna have a C-section. Everyone in my family has C-sections and nobody is able to breastfeed. Our milk all dries up by 3 weeks. And like these ridiculous sort of like just comments that were, very self-defeating, kind of prophetic, sort of like, I just don't work, something's wrong with me. And it was not just their fertility, it was their ability to bear their babies, to deliver them, and also breastfeeding. And so it really just clicked that it's all of the parts of a full female reproductive cycle that we've lost touch with, that we don't trust it. We no longer believe it to be good. We think it's a hindrance. And that's really where I pointed back to the women's movement, where I'm like, what happened? Like, why do women no longer feel like they can give birth, that they can, breastfeed these babies, that they can even conceive? And a lot of this came, through the vehicle of healthcare, directly at the hands of the women's movement. It was a grassroots movement saying, this is what we want to be happy. And it was very misguided. And it really didn't look at the full picture of women being whole.
I remember coming upon your mission, Leah, like 8 years ago or whatever. And there is a video that I watched on YouTube, and I think it was New Feminism, the Guiding Star Project, if you guys want to look it up. But I just remember like there was just this light bulb moment. I'm sure you guys, Sarah and Teresa, I'm sure you both know exactly what I mean with this. But this idea that, okay, we live in this world, and 10 years ago, the world was different 10 years ago, like in terms of, big time in terms of identity and all these things. But I just remember so deeply feeling, oh my word, like I never had heard of it so clearly defined as like healthcare. This has to be done through healthcare, but also that there's a complementarity, that there's the woman and there's the man. And the more I started discovering and understanding what the phrase new feminism means, is this idea that we both have this beautiful nature and this beautiful role that we do not need to compete. And as a matter of fact, if one is weighed too much in one end, where the world is missing out on so much of what women have to offer. I love Edith Stein's quote, we don't need what women do, but who women are, or something like that. I can't remember if that's the way. But that's the piece that really pulled at my heart, because it deeply in me, I'm like, there's something missing. Like, where's this hatred for guys coming in? Like, how is this helping anybody advance so I think it's just recognizing the gift of woman. And that's what holistic feminism is as a movement, is acknowledging the gifts of womanhood and not interrupting our biology, our biological patterns and gifts, merely because we think by doing that we can climb the corporate ladder, have our freedom, yada yada. In reality, women, I believe they're missing out a part of getting to know themselves, the essence of themselves, kind of like Sarah, you were talking about. You didn't necessarily know the essence of yourself because we were covering it up, and our hormones have such a huge role in so many things in our life. So anyway, Leah, to our listeners, look Leah Jacobson up on YouTube and watch the video New Feminism, and it's just this beautiful explanation of what this whole thing is. So beautiful.
Well, to your point there, just really quick, Jamie, what you were getting at was that complementarity between man and woman. Yeah. That was kind of erased and lost, is because we really we chemically set women to the same pace as men. We chemically, took away our cycles unnaturally. And so that complementarity, that sort of ebb and flow, that natural fit of man and woman became much more difficult. Honestly, it created even a more difficult dynamic in relationships. And we've definitely seen that over the, specifically over the last 60 to 70 years, with divorce rates really skyrocketing. And it makes it even harder to be in a relationship when you are chemically altered and you really don't know your body. You really don't know what's happening, and you don't know yourself. So how can you be known?
And let's not forget that birth control, those chemicals were designed by men,
Oh, yes.
We have to remember. And frankly, there was quite a few men involved in even the women's movement. And this is about really setting women up to be equal. And whoever's listening, we believe women deserve everything. And at the same time, they don't need to change who they are or try to be chemically like a man, because at birth control, if you don't understand what it does, is it suppresses the hormones that a woman makes and overlays them with, a chemical pseudo of those hormones. So this is about telling women, again, your body was already good. You don't have to turn into something else to be successful. And we need to support women at the highest ranks of corporation and business to be able to use their bodies for the gifts that God gave their bodies, whether that be having a baby, breastfeeding, being able to plan their family without putting chemicals in their body. All of those things, those are really true women's rights that they deserve.
Yeah, and really it got off course. So it was so close to actually doing something helpful. Honestly, in the 1950s and the 60s, Betty Friedan's feminine mystique and the second wave of the feminist movement, they were articulating correctly a lot of what women were feeling, that angst and that frustration about being told that women's place was in the home, or being told that women's place was somewhere. That was incorrect. And so they were pushing back rightfully against a very narrow societal kind of stereotype for women. However, they just went a little off course in the late 60s and into the 70s and focused in and latched onto birth control and abortion as the solution, this idea of reproductive rights instead of maternal rights, maternity rights, instead of family rights, instead of their ability to be both, they focused on their ability to be one. So it was close. And I think that we can still reset this. And I have a lot of hope moving forward for the women's movement, because, it's been a generation now and we've seen the fruits bearing out, and women are less happy, more anxious, more depressed than they've ever been. We see that statistically, that, all surveys of happiness and general well-being for women have decreased since the onset of this movement. And so I think this younger generation of women, just like Sarah, there's an awakening happening, saying, is this really what I want? I don't feel whole. I don't feel good. And so it's in our daughters' hands and our hands as well, to give them the tools to know their body, to know their fertility, to understand that their body's not the problem. It's a society that doesn't know how to deal with their body.
Yeah, I love what you're saying there. And I'm just thinking about just these different conversations I would have with my mom as I was growing up. And, just again, the product of the generation she was in, the ways that she would push me towards education, and you're going to get a college degree and you're going to go, which was great and which was true and which was motivating. And I needed that. But I remember talking to her all the time as a kid. I was like, oh, I just have this desire, Mom, to live this simple life and to have kids and be a mom. And like, I almost laugh, but I want to be a lunch lady. I was like, I just want to be able to be around and hang out. She was like, no, absolutely not. You need an education. And again, I appreciate where she was coming from with that. But what I found was so interesting as I got into this career and I was working full time and I was doing all these things. I was successful in this job and, I had the degree and I was working up the corporate ladder per se. I wanted to be a mom, and we ended up conceiving, having a baby after a journey with infertility. And it was like my focus, that heart that I had for my motherhood was there. And she looked at me, and I remember feeling so guilty and so confused and almost so frustrated with what she had pushed me towards, because she was like, well, now you should be home with that baby. You should be home. And I'm just like, I just went and racked up all this college debt, and I've been working so hard at this career, and I've been pulling my hair out in all these avenues of what I'm supposed to be as a woman, because I need this career and I need to prove myself in this man's world, et cetera, et cetera. And then she had the audacity to say, well, you should be home with that baby. And it was one of those moments, again, not to beat down or push down on my mom, but I was like, that generation there's a level of confusion. Like, I know that's her heart. And I know that's what she's a great mom, and she was always there for us in that way. And it was just like that pressure, and that you need to be this, and you need to be this, and you need to be this. And I know she was told the exact same thing, but how like hurtful and frustrated I felt and confused. I was like, are you kidding?
Yeah. Totally. Sarah, and
the women with so much on their plates and so much pressure. And I'm like, this is, yeah, it's just fascinating. Like what you're saying, Leah, about like how yes, women belong in all facets of society. And yes, we belong in all facets of the workplaces. I mean, we have a voice and we need to use it, but it's also like just being able to work with what that natural piece of, I loved reading your book and talking about how important it was that you had your children as you did, and how they taught you certain lessons as you were going through building your career. And it was like, this is beautiful, because it's true. Like, we have this timeline where we're supposed to race along and get this, get that done. And it's like, but our motherhood, our womanhood is so naturally ingrained in who we're supposed to be, that it's like, I didn't know who I was until I was a mom. I mean, there was so much I've learned about myself in becoming a mother that has created this boldness and this courage and this side of me that I wasn't able to see before. Yeah. And yeah, I love your approach there, what you're looking at in these movements, and kind of just obviously empathetically looking at what they were given, and there was good there, but just the confusion it's almost created in who we are.
Totally. Sarah, that makes me think of, and maybe you guys had the same feeling, Teresa, Leah, Sarah, I know you did because you just shared, but all of our listeners, so most of our listeners are like in their 20s, but we have a lot of listeners in all ages, which is great. But I vividly remember when I was in my mid-20s being so extremely stressed. I was not yet married. I didn't even have a boyfriend, but I graduated and I had a full-time job. And I'm like, how do I get married, have children, be a mom, and work? Because by the time it's like this calculation of, okay, but then by the time I pick the kid up from daycare, I only have like a couple hours. And I'm not saying this to shame anyone. I actually did end up working full time and having kids, and it worked out fine, and things work out fine. But this is what I realized. And this again is what holistic feminism taught me, is that the problem again is with the world that does not acknowledge our maternity. That's the issue. And so let's say, in a perfect world, actually at Guiding Star Centers, we'll talk about it more at the very end of this episode, there are child watch areas. What if there are child watch areas at a workplace where you legit drop your kid off and you nurse them when you need to? Maybe there's more jobs for women who want to work part-time. So that was and also for those of you listening, this kind of strikes a chord with me, because it was such a hard time in my mid-20s where I just couldn't figure it out. But I did end up talking with my supervisor, my boss, to see if I could work part-time. And normally they don't do that, but they did. They let me. And so if you are struggling right now and you're like, if I can afford it, can I work part-time? Have that conversation with your employer. But main point, Leah, that's what I love so much about holistic feminism too, is this idea that it's not just the world needs to accept women as we are, because that's true, but the world needs to accept that we can bear children and that we have a role in our family. And if we can adjust the workplace and life to accommodate for that, we'll be all the better for it.
Amen. Amen. I mean, and Teresa,
Amen.
you're a working mom too, so you get it. There's that hard rub that some of us feel really called to work outside the home. Some of us feel that that's how God just wired us and made us, and we're supposed to do something. But just as many of us don't, just as many of us are supposed to use our gifts in a different way. But the common denominator to wherever a woman is called to be is that she's meant to be in relationship. Like our body speaks that biological, physical, theological, philosophical truth that our body, every part of it, is made for another person to interact with. Like, I mean, maybe that's a little crude to say, I guess, but I mean, we literally have parts of our body, organs, entire things that make no sense on their own. And so to ignore the relationships that we have, to ignore the other people that these parts of us were created for, is incredibly insulting. It's asking us to change how we were made. We don't have breasts for no reason.
I remember being in a group of women when I was in my early 20s, and she was different than me. She was someone who was very high up in her career, and she was pregnant with her first child, and she was talking all about how she would be putting that child in daycare right away. And it was just, for me, I mean, I have worked my whole marriage and my whole childbearing years, but I really wanted to stay home, and I really only worked part-time. And hearing her, it was just, at that time in my early 20s, was a very strong turnoff, because I kind of thought she was just, gosh, you're having these kids and you're just going to let like a daycare raise them. Now, I've completely, we get wise, right? We get wise in our older age, and we learn, that, gosh, I cannot judge somebody if I have not walked in their shoes. I don't know anybody and where they come from, or what their personal passions are, and what they've gone through, and what their heart speaks to them, right? And I look at that and I think, gosh, that was really rude of me to judge her. Because, years later, I went and worked full time while my husband stayed at home with our kids. I just know that wherever you are out there, this is about really just being empowered to know your heart and to know who you are as a woman. And what we're trying to share with you is, we think there's just been a missing kind of piece, a whole missing hole, you could say, that because of maybe what's happened over the last 50 to 100 years, women have been kind of sold a lie about really who they are. I mean, that's the way I would see it.
And it's this demand, like the supply and demand sort of thing. If women aren't demanding that there is accommodation for them, and whatever that is, a comfy place to pump and not a bathroom or a closet or anything like that, to acknowledge that, as women, we do have different needs, because of our ability to bear children. And Leah, I like how you said that, like our body it really is, if you look at it, it doesn't make sense on its own. So I think that's important to know. But in terms of this movement, Leah, can you talk a little bit about how people can learn about holistic feminism, and how you were able to put this movement into a framework that has the ability to basically ripple into, our nation, basically?
I think, the first thing to understand is the exact moment we are, like, historically. We talked a little bit about, like, contextually, like how we kind of got here. The women's movement kind of took a wrong step, narrowed down the acceptable place for a woman to be successful, and what it kind of told us how we were going to be happy. Got it wrong, obviously. And so we're at a really important moment with the launch of kind of a next wave of the women's movement. And I just have to be very frank that the kind of the old adherents to the last few waves of the feminist movement, what they're proposing and moving forward with, guys, it's not the right road. It's not a good path for us to continue going down, because it's failing to acknowledge the body of men or women as biological guideposts to identity. And so it's replacing our body with it's placing greater importance on our mind than it is on the physical reality of our body. And so in order for us to really create a movement that's capable of uniting women, of making women understand one another, and our body is what unites us. You know, we can have conversations with women who are very politically, religiously, very different than us. You know, when you're sitting together breastfeeding your baby at the park, I mean, there is a biological reality of connection of my body does what your body does. I understand you in just this little way. And the current kind of women's movement, or the feminist movement, the path that it's walking down, it's removing all physical guideposts. It's removing our fertility, our childbearing, our breastfeeding as points of connection for women. And so that's really what it means to embrace and move forward with a holistic feminist movement. It's saying, first and foremost, the body matters. You cannot throw the body out. It has to be first and foremost what helps to determine your identity as a human person. And that's incredibly controversial and difficult, I think. I think a lot of people really struggle with that idea because we've been kind of building up for 50 years to this idea of the body doesn't matter. It doesn't make you happy. It doesn't affect anything, but it does. So that's where the movement, the framework of the movement must begin, is with that basic, simple understanding. And really it's an invitation and a proposition to people across all political, religious beliefs, all sorts of different places. It's a very simple idea that I think many of us can connect on. So the invitation is wide open for everybody to join this. And practically, you know, how I, as somebody who has just, you know, studied the history, and I think that we have to walk back the path the same way that got us here. And I think it was through the vehicle of healthcare and higher education. And so specifically healthcare is where I feel we can probably influence women the most, is in the exam room with trusted providers that believe this and that affirm this, that your body is not the problem. Your body is beautiful and we can help to optimize your health. So I think through healthcare. And so the work that I've done is trying to create guiding star centers that can tell women the truth about themselves, that can affirm their identity, that can help put them on the right path. And so I'm grateful to women like Sarah that lead these centers, that provide that programming, that really do the hands-on work. And they are the worldview distribution points. They're the ones in the local community saying, your body matters and we're here to optimize its health and understand it.
Sarah, could you give us a story or an example of a client or a patient that has come through the doors of Guiding Star, and just how the services you guys provide make them feel?
Well, honestly, this is an area that I wish my client care coordinator was with me, because she just is such a beautiful asset to our center and what she provides in caring for women in all these aspects. But, you know, specifically, I actually started out at the Guiding Star Center as a fertility care practitioner. And so I worked with a lot of women in trying to understand their bodies, and really just in that one section of our fertility, right? At Guiding Star Centers, we're coming around her in pregnancy and birth education, in postpartum preparation, lactation services, family services, etc. But in my specific experiences and what I did as a fertility care practitioner, it was absolutely incredible what I was able to see unfold in front of me. And just about every person I was able to sit with. I mean, obviously there were some that we didn't, necessarily connect on that particular level, but I'm just thinking of this one student that I had, or I shouldn't say student, client that I had. She was learning about her cycles. And, really she was preparing for marriage, and there was a little bit of a rub there, and it was difficult for her to talk about her body in this way with her fiance. And as we kind of explored this and we started to talk more about her cycles, it was absolutely incredible how that communication, how that openness, how just that understanding of her natural body and what was going on totally revolutionized how they were able to walk through their preparations towards marriage. And it was something so much more enriching to them to understand this area of intimacy that they were excited for. And it brought them closer together. And ultimately it led to them, once they were married, having their first child and working through the birth process and just empathy, like it built his empathy for her and her emotional state throughout all these different phases and her ability to believe in herself through the birth process, those first weeks after postpartum. And it was amazing for me to see how interconnected that one little piece that I got to walk through with them in teaching her about her cycle and learning to talk about her body. It changed the trajectory of the way their relationship works, of the way they communicated with each other, of how they embraced their individual bodies, their individual selves, but also in how they embrace their relationship and ultimately their family and the needs they had of each other in walking through that. So, I mean, it's beautiful what we're able to see happen when we understand the reality of our body. I mean, and it like Leah said, it's almost this simple concept of just accepting what is, but it's revolutionary in how it changes the way we interact with each other and the way we care for each other. And obviously you guys with the Hormone Genius podcast and understanding to the level of what our hormones are doing in our cycles, it's like it just changes everything and how you're able to communicate and how you're able to connect and love each other. And that's ultimately what we're all about, right? Like we are made to love, and to do that, you stand first.
Absolutely, Sarah. Yeah. And I mean, I love how I think, Leah, you've coined this, the female superpowers, ovulation, gestation, lactation, really supporting women in all of those bodily things that all women are interested in at some point, maybe not always at the same time, but when they are, they need the support around it. And that's what, centers like the Guiding Star Center, and there's equally a ton more out there that are trying to support women in this way. And I think, in the organic, natural health movement, we see some truth, I think, moving towards a holistic feminism in a route that's a little bit different. But I really think, again, it's still in a place where people are seeking the truth in that they want what is good for their body. Basically, they don't want to put chemicals in. They don't want to alter. They don't want to band-aid over symptoms. So I love that this idea that we can, again, like Leah said, we're going the route of health here because people want to take care of their bodies. They want to live long. They want to live happy, and they want to live in good health. And so supporting women and their bodies and their abilities in health is what we know will lead to them feeling happy and whole.
Mm-hmm. Amen. That's so good, Teresa.
Mm-hmm. Amen. Awesome. Guys, thank you so much. For our listeners, if you're wanting to learn more about this movement, to be a holistic feminist, holistic feminism, be sure to check out Leah's book. I'll include that in the show notes. So lumenpress.org. And to learn more about Guiding Star centers and affiliate locations, be sure to check out the guidingstarproject.com.
.com. Yep. Sorry.
Yep.
.com.
Yep.
I think it is .org as well. I think either will get you there.
Okay. So, and again, there are healthcare centers like Teresa alluded. There are centers around the nation that do provide holistic care. What I love so much about Guiding Star, and of course, I'm very biased because I'm a founder of a Guiding Star location, but it's that we can unite together under one name, because when the world sees something over and over and over again, when we see the same thing, we take notice. But if it's just more of a movement in that way, which I love, it's noticeable. So again, check out the websites to find out more about the book, to find more about the movement, to find more about the centers. And normally I ask this last question with our interviewees of what do you wish every young woman knew about her hormone genius? But I think what I'm going to ask instead is, what do you want everyone, and I'll have Leah and Sarah both answer this. What do you want our listeners to know about holistic feminism? Like if you could sum it up into a sentence.
I got mine. You good? I'll go first, Sarah. I think if everyone could understand that your physical body, it teaches you deep spiritual truths about who you were made to be. And so pay attention to your body because it's talking.
Ooh, I love that. That needs to be a meme or a quote or something. That's beautiful.
Let's put it on a shirt.
Yeah, I know. Oh my gosh. All right, Sarah, what about you?
It kind of rings along with what Leah's saying. We were created good. We were created for great purpose. And, we were all created for different things. Our unique abilities suggest, that what that path is for us, but our bodies tell us so much about who we are and what we can accomplish in that. And so just as Leah's saying, embrace that, embrace your body, understand it. It's telling you the truth about who you are, and it's going to help you understand where you're going in all the aspects of how you're created uniquely and wonderfully. So
awesome.
Thank you so much, Leah and Sarah, for being with us today on the Hormone Genius podcast. This has really been a joy to be with you.